Kate pulled her hair into a messy bun as water sprayed across her kitchen floor. The sink had been dripping for days, but tonight it decided to transform into a miniature fountain. She grabbed towels, desperately trying to contain the growing puddle while scrolling through her phone for emergency plumbing services. Reliable repairs available 24/7, she read aloud, then pressed call without hesitation. The pleasant male voice that answered promised someone would arrive within the hour. Kate looked down at her old gray sweatpants with a hole in one knee and the oversized university t-shirt she'd been cleaning in. No time to change now. 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Kate opened the door, still clutching a damp towel, and found herself face to face with a tall man holding a toolbox. His faded jeans and simple navy work shirt couldn't hide his broad shoulders and strong arms. This wasn't the older, pot-bellied plumber she had expected. "Hi, I'm Tom from Reliable Repairs," he said, his voice warm and deep. "Someone called about a leak?" "Yes, that's me." "I'm Kate." She stepped back, suddenly conscious of water spots on her shirt and her bare feet. "The kitchen sink decided to attack me tonight." Tom smiled, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. "Don't worry, sinks can sense fear. They always pick the worst moments." In the kitchen, Tom knelt to examine under the sink while Kate hovered nearby, occasionally pointing out where the water seemed to be coming from. The small space brought them close together, and Kate caught the scent of his cologne, something subtle and woody. "Hand me that wrench?" Tom asked, pointing to his open toolbox. Kate passed him the tool, their fingers brushing briefly. A small jolt of electricity seemed to pass between them, causing Kate to pull back quickly. Tom's eyes met hers for a moment before he returned to the pipes. "So have you lived here long?" he asked, his voice slightly muffled from inside the cabinet. "Just 2 months," Kate replied, leaning against the counter. "After my divorce was finalized, I wanted a fresh start." Tom emerged from under the sink, wiping his hands on a rag. "Brave move, taking on a house this old by yourself." "Brave or stupid," Kate laughed. "Every week something else breaks. I'm beginning to think the house is testing me." "Old houses have personality," Tom said, standing up. He was taller than she had first realized. "They need someone who appreciates them." As Tom explained the problem with the pipes, something about water pressure and old connections, Kate found herself watching his hands. They were strong but moved with surprising gentleness as he pointed out the damaged section. "I can fix this tonight, but honestly, these old pipes might give you more trouble down the road," he said. "Of course they will," Kate sighed. The joys of homeownership. "Don't worry," Tom smiled again, that dimple reappearing. "Save my number. Old houses are my specialty." For the next hour, Tom worked while Kate made coffee. The awkwardness faded as they talked, about the neighborhood, about the history of houses like hers, about nothing in particular. When he finally tightened the last connection and water flowed normally into the sink without a single drip escaping, Kate felt an odd mix of relief and disappointment that the repair was complete. "Good as new," Tom said, closing his toolbox, "or at least good as a 100-year-old pipe can be." At the door, Tom handed Kate his card. "Call anytime," he said. "For house emergencies, of course." "Of course," Kate replied, feeling a warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the evening's panic. After Tom left, Kate stood in her fixed kitchen, turning his business card over in her fingers. For the first time since moving in, the old house felt a little less empty. Kate stared at the small puddle forming beneath the upstairs bathroom radiator. It had been exactly 8 days since Tom had fixed her kitchen sink. She picked up her phone, scrolled to his number, and hesitated. Was a leaky radiator enough of an emergency to call him again? Before she could decide, water began dripping faster. "Reliable Repairs, this is Tom," his voice answered after 2 rings. "Hi Tom, it's Kate, the sink lady from last week." She winced at her awkward introduction. "I have another issue. The radiator this time." "I remember you." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. "I can come by after my last job, around 6. Throughout the afternoon, Kate found herself tidying up more thoroughly than necessary. She even changed from her work clothes into a casual blue dress she hadn't worn in months. When the doorbell rang, she took a deep breath before opening it. Tom stood on her porch, toolbox in hand, looking even more handsome than she remembered. He wore the same style of work clothes, but his hair was slightly damp, as if he'd showered before coming over. "That bad, huh?" he smiled, noticing her studying him. "No, you look." Kate stopped herself. "I mean, come in. The radiator's upstairs." As they walked through the house, Tom paused to look at the crown molding in the hallway. "They don't make them like this anymore," he said, reaching up to touch the detailed woodwork. "This place must have been something special when it was built." "It still could be," Kate admitted, "if I knew what I was doing." In the bathroom, Tom knelt beside the radiator while Kate sat on the edge of the bathtub, trying not to stare at the way his shirt stretched across his back as he worked. "Your radiator isn't the only thing that needs attention," Tom said, glancing around the bathroom. "These old houses, they're full of hidden problems." "Are you trying to scare me or drum up more business?" Kate asked with a small laugh. Tom turned to face her, his expression serious but kind. "Neither. But I hate seeing beautiful things neglected." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. When he finished fixing the radiator, Tom suggested walking through the house to check for other potential issues. Room by room, he pointed out small problems that could become bigger ones: a window that didn't seal properly, a spot on the ceiling showing early signs of water damage, floorboards that creaked more than they should. In the spare bedroom, Tom ran his hand along a wall with peeling wallpaper. "This room has great morning light. What are your plans for it?" Kate hesitated. "I don't really have plans. After my divorce, just getting through each day was enough." Tom nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes fixing a house can help fix other things too. He pulled out a small notebook and began writing. "Look, I could help you tackle these issues one by one. We could create a restoration plan that won't break your bank." "Why would you do that?" Kate asked, genuinely curious. "Professional pride," Tom said with a slight shrug. "And maybe," he trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed. "Maybe what?" Kate prompted. "Maybe I just like old houses," he finished, but his eyes suggested he might be talking about more than just the house. In the kitchen, Tom laid out his notes on the counter, their shoulders nearly touching as they stood side by side. He proposed a schedule of repairs spread over several months. "This means you'd be here a lot," Kate observed, trying to sound casual. "Is that a problem?" Tom asked quietly. Kate looked around her kitchen at the sink he had fixed, at his hands on the paper between them, at the way the evening light made the room feel warmer than it had in weeks. "No," she said finally. "Not a problem at all." The sound of hammering paused as Tom's footsteps approached the kitchen. He had been working on restoring the original hardwood floors in Kate's dining room all morning. 1 month into their renovation plan, and already the house was beginning to transform. So was Kate, though she hardly noticed it herself. "Something smells." Tom appeared in the doorway, searching for a polite word. "Terrible?" Kate offered, staring hopelessly at the smoking pan on her stove. "Disastrous?" "Like someone's trying to poison the neighborhood." Tom laughed, crossing the kitchen to stand beside her. "I was going to say interesting." He peered into the blackened pan where chunks of chicken sat in a sauce that had separated into oil and clumps. "What were you aiming for?" "Chicken marsala." The recipe looked simple online. Kate poked at the mess with a spatula, then sighed. "Another takeout night, I guess." Tom gently took the spatula from her hand. "Do you mind if I?" He gestured toward the stove. "Be my guest. It can't get worse." To Kate's surprise, Tom confidently turned off the heat, grabbed a fresh pan, and began searching through her refrigerator. His movements were precise and practiced as he collected ingredients and started chopping an onion with impressive speed. "Where did you learn to cook like that?" Kate asked, leaning against the counter as she watched him. "I was a sous chef for 3 years before I got into renovation work," Tom said, not looking up from his chopping. "At Riverside downtown. That fancy place? Why would you leave that to fix leaky pipes?" Tom's hands stilled for a moment. "Long story, but I like working with my hands either way. Cooking, carpentry, both are about creating something." He slid the onions into the pan, where they sizzled pleasantly. "And both can be taught. Hand me that garlic." Before Kate knew it, she was following his instructions, chopping herbs, stirring sauce, learning the difference between simmering and boiling. The kitchen filled with delicious smells as Tom guided her through salvaging ingredients from her failed attempt into something new. "See? "You're not burning anything," Tom said as Kate successfully flipped a piece of chicken. "Only because you're supervising," she laughed. Their fingers brushed as he adjusted her grip on the spatula, and neither pulled away immediately. They ate at her small kitchen table, the dining room still being under renovation. Kate took her first bite and closed her eyes in appreciation. "I can't believe we made this. I can't cook to save my life." "You just did cook," Tom pointed out. "And past failures don't determine future results. That's true for cooking," and he hesitated. "Other things too." Something in his tone made Kate look up. "Speaking from experience?" Tom nodded slowly. "My cooking career ended after a relationship did. My ex was the head chef. When we broke up, staying wasn't an option." "I'm sorry," Kate said softly. "Don't be. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have returned to my first love, fixing things, and I wouldn't be sitting here now." The way he looked at her made Kate's cheeks warm. She took another bite to hide her reaction. "What about you?" Tom asked. "Your ex. Was the divorce recent?" 10 months ago. After 7 years together, he decided I wasn't exciting enough anymore. His loss," Tom said simply, the sincerity in his voice unmistakable. They continued eating, the conversation drifting to lighter topics: favorite foods, cooking disasters, the time Tom had accidentally set flammy desserts on fire for an entire wedding party. As they cleared their plates, Kate realized she had laughed more in the past hour than she had in months. "Same time next week?" Tom asked as he prepared to leave for the evening. "For the bathroom tiles, I mean." "Actually," Kate said, feeling suddenly brave, "maybe you could come a little earlier. We could cook dinner first. You know, if you wanted to teach me more." Tom's smile was warm. "I'd like that. I'll bring the ingredients." As he left, Kate looked around her kitchen, somehow messier than before but infinitely more full of possibility. "You're coming to the garden this Saturday, right?" Tom asked, carefully applying a thin layer of grout between the newly laid backsplash tiles in Kate's kitchen. Their weekly cooking lessons had become a fixture in both their lives, as regular as his work on her house. Kate looked up from the paint samples she was considering for the living room. "Garden. The community garden I mentioned last week. We're planting the spring vegetables and could use extra hands." He glanced over his shoulder at her. "Unless you're busy." Kate hesitated. Her ex-husband had always mocked her interest in gardening, calling it a dirty hobby whenever she brought up wanting to try it. "I don't know the first thing about gardening," she admitted. "Perfect," Tom grinned. "Then I can finally teach you something you're worse at than cooking." That earned him a paint chip thrown playfully at his back. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected nerves. Kate changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple t-shirt. What did one wear to garden anyway? Tom picked her up in his truck, the bed filled with tools and seedling trays. "Ready to get dirty?" he asked as she climbed in. The community garden was tucked between 2 apartment buildings, a surprising patch of green in the urban landscape. As they approached, Kate was struck by the diverse group already working there: elderly couples tending established plots, young families with children running between rows, teenagers reluctantly helping but secretly enjoying themselves. "Tom's here," called out an older woman with silver hair, "and he brought a friend." Kate found herself quickly introduced to everyone, names blurred together, but the warm welcomes were genuine. She watched as Tom greeted each person individually, asking specific questions about their lives or families. He knew everyone's name, even the children's. "You're popular here," Kate observed as they walked to an empty plot. "I helped build the raised beds when the garden first started," Tom explained. "Been coming ever since." He handed her a tray of tiny green seedlings, tomatoes, very forgiving for beginners. Under Tom's patient guidance, Kate learned to dig holes the right depth, to gently remove the seedlings from their containers, and to pat the soil around them with just enough pressure. Her hands grew increasingly dirty, and to her surprise, she didn't mind at all. Across the garden, a small girl of about 5 was struggling with her watering can. Without hesitation, Tom jogged over to help her, kneeling to her level and demonstrating how to water without drowning the plants. The girl's delighted giggle carried across the garden. "He's good with kids," commented an elderly man working nearby. "Been teaching my granddaughter since she could walk." "Patient man, you're Tom." "He's not my Tom," Kate said quickly, feeling her cheeks warm. The old man just smiled knowingly and returned to his weeding. By midday, Kate's back ached pleasantly, her hands were thoroughly dirty, and a sense of satisfaction filled her as she looked at their completed row of tomato plants. "Not bad for a first-timer," Tom said, handing her a bottle of water. They sat together on the edge of a raised bed, watching the garden community work around them. "I've always wanted to try gardening," Kate admitted. "My ex thought it was beneath me." Tom frowned slightly. "Growing things is never beneath anyone. Creating life instead of just consuming it, that's something to be proud of." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken when two young boys ran up, asking Tom to help fix their plot's irrigation system. As he walked away, Kate noticed the easy way he interacted with the children, patient and respectful. The silver-haired woman from earlier sat down beside Kate. "Tom's been a blessing to this garden," she said. "Always fixing, always helping, but I've never seen him bring anyone here before." Kate watched as Tom knelt in the dirt, laughing at something one of the boys said. Soil smudged his forehead where he'd wiped sweat away, and his smile was unguarded, genuine. "He said the garden needed extra hands," Kate said softly. The woman patted Kate's arm. "Honey, that boy has plenty of hands he could have asked. He wanted yours specifically." When Tom returned, Kate's smile held a new warmth, and when their dirty hands accidentally touched while packing up tools, neither pulled away too quickly. Kate stood in her nearly finished kitchen, running her hand along the new countertop. 4 months of renovation had transformed not just her house but her routine. Tom's regular presence, fixing things during the week, cooking lessons on Thursdays, garden visits on weekends, had become the structure around which she built her days. It terrified her how much she looked forward to seeing him. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting Tom today. He was finishing the upstairs bathroom, and they'd agreed to take a break until the special tile arrived. When she opened the door, her smile instantly faded. "David, what are you doing here?" Her ex-husband stood on her porch, looking exactly as he had 10 months ago. Expensive watch, designer clothes, and that smile that once made her heart race but now just made her stomach tighten. "Can't I check on how my ex-wife is doing?" He stepped past her without waiting for an invitation. "I was in the neighborhood for a client meeting." Kate reluctantly closed the door, wishing she had pretended not to be home. David wandered through the house, his eyes critically taking in every change. "So this is what you've been doing with the settlement money. Interesting choices. Did you need something specific?" Kate asked, following him. "Just curious about your new life." He ran a finger along a freshly painted wall. "The guys at the firm mentioned seeing you around town with some handyman. Quite the step down from a corporate lawyer, isn't it?" Kate felt her cheeks burn. "Tom is a skilled craftsman, and he's just helping with the house." David snorted. "Oh please, Katie. The way Mike described how you two looked at the farmer's market, this isn't just about crown molding." He picked up a framed photo of Kate at the community garden. "This new earthy version of you is different." "People changed," Kate said stiffly. "Not that much." David set down the photo. "Just be careful. These working-class guys see a divorced woman with a nice settlement as an easy target." The sound of a truck pulling up outside made Kate's heart sink. She glanced out the window to see Tom getting out, carrying a box of supplies. "Looks like your handyman has arrived early," David said with a smirk. "Should I stay and meet him?" "No," Kate said quickly. "He's just dropping off materials." The doorbell rang, and Kate moved to answer it, but David reached it first, pulling the door open with a wide, insincere smile. "You must be the famous Tom," David said, extending his hand. "I've heard so much about your work." Tom stood there, clearly surprised, but he shook David's hand. His eyes moved to Kate, questioning. "Tom, this is David, my ex-husband," Kate said, her voice sounding strained even to her own ears. "He was just leaving." "No rush," David said smoothly. "I was just admiring all the changes here. Must be keeping you busy." The way he emphasized the last word made its double meaning clear. Tom's expression remained professional, but Kate saw his jaw tighten slightly. The house had good bones. It just needed someone who appreciated its potential. "How metaphorical," David replied. He turned to Kate. "I'll call you about those tax documents we still need to sort out." He brushed past Tom, adding quietly but not quietly enough, Careful with your obvious crush on the help, Katie. It's a bit desperate. Kate stood frozen, mortified that Tom might have heard. When David's car pulled away, the silence felt suffocating. I didn't know you were coming today, she finally said, unable to meet Tom's eyes. I found the special tile you wanted, thought you'd be excited. Tom's voice was carefully neutral, but I can come back another time if this isn't good. Maybe that's best, Kate said quickly. I have a lot going on this week actually, maybe we should postpone the bathroom work. And Thursday's lesson. Tom studied her face for a long moment. Whatever you need, he finally said, his voice professional in a way it hadn't been in weeks. Just call when you're ready to continue. As he walked back to his truck, Kate closed the door and leaned against it, wondering how everything had shifted so quickly from comfortable to complicated. Kate balanced precariously on the stepladder, paintbrush stretched toward the ceiling. 2 weeks had passed since David's unexpected visit, 2 weeks of polite, brief text exchanges with Tom about rescheduling the remaining work. Finally, tired of waiting and feeling increasingly foolish about her reaction, she decided to finish painting the living room herself. The ladder wobbled as she reached further than was safe. Just as the ladder tilted dangerously to one side, the doorbell rang, startling her. Kate felt herself falling and closed her eyes, bracing for impact. Instead of hitting the floor, she landed against something solid but yielding. Strong arms wrapped around her, breaking her fall. Paint splashed across both of them as the brush went flying. Planning to repaint yourself along with the ceiling? Tom's voice was warm in her ear, his chest solid against her back. Kate turned in his arms, face just inches from his. Blue paint streaked his cheek and speckled his hair. "What are you doing here?" she asked, not moving away. "You weren't answering my texts about the bathroom tile delivery." His arms remained loosely around her. The front door was unlocked. Kate became acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the paint seeping through her old shirt, of Tom's hands gentle but steady at her waist. "I'm sorry about the other week," she said suddenly. "With David showing up and saying those things, it's none of my business," Tom said, finally stepping back and looking at the paint damage. "Your ex-husband, your relationship. That's your private life." "But it is your business," Kate insisted, finding courage she didn't know she had. "Because he was wrong about everything, and I let his words affect how I treated you." Tom's eyes met hers, cautious but with something hopeful hiding behind his careful expression. "Wrong about what, exactly?" Kate took a deep breath. "About you being just the help. About me having a crush." Her voice nearly failed on the last word, which seemed so inadequate for the feelings that had been growing for months. "And do you?" Tom asked quietly. "Have a crush?" Kate laughed nervously, paint-covered hands fidgeting. "I'm 40 years old, Tom. I think what I have is something a lot more serious than a crush." The careful mask Tom had been wearing the past 2 weeks finally slipped. He stepped closer again, reaching up to wipe a spot of paint from her cheek, his touch lingering. "I've been interested in you since you opened the door in those ratty sweatpants the first night," he admitted. "But I have a strict rule about not mixing business with pleasure." "Is that why the renovations kept getting extended?" Kate asked, a small smile forming. Tom's answering grin was slightly sheepish. "Maybe I found a few extra projects that weren't strictly necessary." His expression grew more serious. "I was waiting until the job was officially done before asking you out properly. Didn't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. So all those cooking lessons, garden visits, were me finding excuses to spend time with you without breaking my professional ethics." Tom gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, leaving another paint smudge. "And then your ex showed up, and I thought maybe he was right, that I had misread everything." Kate shook her head firmly. "The only thing you misread was my panic. I was embarrassed and afraid you'd think I was just a sad, divorced woman with a pathetic crush on her handyman." Tom laughed softly. "And I was afraid you'd think I was just a guy trying to milk a job by flirting with a client." They stood in the middle of the paint-splattered room, both covered in blue splotches, the tension of weeks finally broken. "So," Kate said, heart pounding, "does this mean the renovation is officially complete?" Tom glanced around at the half-painted ceiling, then back at Kate with a smile that made her breath catch. "I'd say this room still needs work, but my professional relationship with the homeowner?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "That can definitely be considered complete." His lips met hers, gentle at first, then with growing confidence as Kate responded, paint-covered hands finding their way to his shoulders, not caring about the mess they were making. The string lights Kate had hung across the backyard cast a warm glow over her guests as they mingled on the new deck Tom had built. 3 months had passed since their paint-splattered first kiss, and tonight's housewarming party marked the official completion of the renovation, and the beginning of something far more important. "I still can't believe this is the same house," her sister Jane remarked, running her hand along the refinished banister, "or the same Kate, for that matter." Kate smiled, watching as Tom charmed a group of her friends with the story of the great kitchen sink disaster that had first brought them together. He caught her eye across the room and winked, causing a familiar warmth to spread through her chest. "You look happy," Jane observed, "happier than I've seen you in years." "I am happy," Kate admitted. It still surprised her sometimes how easy happiness had become. As the evening progressed, Kate found herself watching her friends and family explore the transformed spaces of her home. The house that had once felt like a broken-down shelter after her divorce now felt like a true home, filled with warmth and possibility. Tom appeared at her side, slipping his arm around her waist. "Everything okay? You've been quiet." "Just enjoying the moment," Kate said, leaning into him. "I never thought I'd feel this comfortable in my own skin again." Tom pressed a kiss to her temple. "Almost time for the surprise. Ready?" Kate raised an eyebrow. "What surprise?" "The renovation is done." "Almost done," Tom corrected with a mysterious smile. "Give me 5 minutes, then bring everyone to the far corner of the backyard." Before Kate could question him further, he slipped away, exchanging conspiratorial nods with Jane as he passed her. 5 minutes later, Kate led her curious guests across the lawn toward the back corner, where a large object stood covered by a tarp. Tom stood beside it, looking both nervous and excited. "What is this?" Kate asked as they gathered around. "Well," Tom began, addressing the group but looking only at Kate. "When you renovate a house, you follow the blueprint. But the best projects are the ones where you discover something new along the way." His eyes held Kate's. "Sometimes you find something worth changing the plans for." He pulled away the tarp to reveal a small, beautiful greenhouse. Its wooden frame matched the deck he had built, and glass panels gleamed in the string lights. Inside, Kate could see potting benches, hanging planters, and tiny green seedlings already sprouting in neat rows. A collective sound of appreciation rose from the guests, but Kate hardly heard them. She stepped forward, touching the glass with trembling fingers. "You built this?" she whispered. "Every inch," Tom confirmed. "Consider it a graduation present from your gardening lessons." Kate stepped inside, breathing in the earthy scent of fresh soil and new growth. The greenhouse was perfectly sized for her yard, with clever storage solutions and even a small bench where someone could sit and enjoy the greenery. "I thought you might want your own space to grow things," Tom said, following her inside. "Something that's just yours, separate from the community garden." "It's perfect," Kate said, turning to face him. Behind them, she was vaguely aware of her sister herding the other guests back toward the house, giving them privacy. "There's one more thing," Tom said, suddenly looking nervous. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Open it." Inside was a single key, newer and shinier than the vintage ones that opened her old house doors. "A key to the greenhouse?" Kate asked, confused. "No," Tom said softly. "A key to my house. You've let me help rebuild your life. I was hoping you might consider helping me build something new, too." He took her hands in his. "No pressure, no rush. Just a door that's always open to you." Kate looked from the key to Tom's hopeful face, then at the greenhouse around them, a perfect blend of her newfound passion and his skilled hands, a space created just for her to grow things. "I think," she said, closing her fingers around the key and stepping into his arms, "that we've already built something pretty wonderful together." As they kissed in the greenhouse, surrounded by new beginnings, Kate realized that the handyman hadn't just fixed her house. He had helped her create a home, with room for both their futures to grow.